Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1108, 1108, April the 20th, 2020. It's Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so we're going to cover some more stuff from the recent document dumps, some stuff related to that, and then we'll get into the winner of the dumbass of the week. So the first place I want to start is about a week and a half or so ago, when they released the footnotes, the declassified footnotes and the Carter Page FISA from the IG report. It was at that point that we learned that there's supposedly this Russian disinformation, that there was multiple analysts who had given this information to the Crossfire Hurricane team. They knew that the analysts had determined that these sources, subsources, the sources for the subsource, Steele's main subsource, were these Russian intel officers, and we get this whole narrative of the Russian disinformation. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. I'm inclined not to believe it, and I have been saying that since this narrative began. As I've said, for those of you watching my videos, for the past 2 years I've been saying, what Russians? I mean, they keep dropping the names of these Russians: Deripaska, Milian, Surkov, Trubnikov. In the case of Milian, he is an American citizen. He's been living in the United States for over 20 years. And he's from Belarus, not Russia. And he has no connections to Russian intelligence. And then, of course, Deripaska, he's a globalist. Yes, he knows Putin. Putin knows all the billionaires in Russia. I'm sure they know each other. But Deripaska, again, is not someone who the Russian government would trust or have a lot of confidence in to hold on to secrets or anything like that. It's just Deripaska is someone who's driven by his own personal desires, his own agenda. Deripaska's out for Deripaska. He's kind of a loose cannon in this type of thing. He has too many close associations with people in the West. He would never be trusted by Russian intelligence at all. So Deripaska is not an issue either. Then, of course, Trubnikov and Surkov, they were former Russian intelligence officers and things like that, but they're kind of out of the loop now. I'm sure they still have friends in the intelligence community, but even they have far too many contacts and friends in the West. Again, not the type of people. Putin and the Russian intelligence, you got to be a straight up loyalist, and you have to be around for a very long time to get into these positions. So, I'm having a rough time buying it, and that's why I've been saying for the past 2 years, what Russians? These are not, when they use this phrase, the Russians, what they're trying to imply is Russian intelligence people working for Putin. This is what the narrative is trying to tell you. And I have a rough time believing that Putin and Russian intelligence would be working with any of these characters: Surkov, Trubnikov, and certainly Milian or Deripaska. So this is my problem with this whole idea that there was Russian disinformation. Then we come to find out that Trubnikov, because Christopher Steele, we find out that his main subsource is Milian. Milian is interviewed 3 times by the FBI. He says, "Look, half of what you're telling me is complete nonsense. I know nothing about it. The other things that you're talking about are things I may have mentioned to Steele, but certainly they were just conversations that we had, with my friends drinking or something. There's no intelligence value to any of it. I can't believe he would give that to the FBI and call it intelligence, and they would use it to get, search warrants and things." So even Milian blew this thing up, and that's what the analysts were talking about when they blew up Milian as a source. And then, of course, Steele goes to Kavalik, and also he told the FBI that his two of the subsources, or two of the sources for his subsource, Milian's sources, were Trubnikov and Surkov. And then we find out that Halper, Stefan Halper, has a close relationship with both of these characters, and we know for a fact, he even admits in this transcript that we just read through with Papagalopoulos, he admits to Papagalopoulos, he starts naming these very people. Trubnikov and Sarkov and two other ones that he says he's good friends with, has great relations with. He talks to him all the time. And we know that he, and even tell Papadopoulos, hey, I just had Trubnikov. I invited him to the London Center 2 times just this past year. That was in 2016 when all this is going down. So now what all this is boiling down to is something that Nunes said when he was on Fox News on Sunday morning. And he was asked about where the Republicans are with their investigation in the House Intelligence Committee as a result of the recent document dumps from the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senate Judiciary Committee, and also from the declassified footnotes. And Nunes says, yeah, well, right now we're focused on this and this, and then he says we're focused on these 3 Russians, the 3 Russians. Now, I'm not sure who the 3rd Russian is, but I know who the 2 of the 3 are. I know he's talking about Trubnikov and Sornov. And so I think Nunes, in a lot of ways, is looking at this the exact same way I'm looking at it. Because for a very long time, I'd be saying, what Russians? What Russians? Tell me what Russians you're talking about. And then about 6 months ago or so, we started hearing Nunes saying the same thing. It's like, okay, so, we hear all this about Russians. So what Russians? I don't think there were any Russians. So Nunes has now been kind of on this same line as I've been on for quite some time. Now on Sunday morning, he says, yeah, we're looking at these two or 3 Russians. He mentioned 3. I know who 2 of them are. I'm not sure who the 3rd one is he's referring to. But he's talking for surely about Trubnikov and Sorkov. Sornov, I think his name is. And these would be these are 2 of the Russians that Christopher Steele had mentioned to Kathleen Kvalik and also to the FBI. And what Nunes is talking about is exactly what I'm saying. It's just I can come out and say it on a YouTube video months ago because I'm not a congressman and I don't have to meet the same sort of standard that Nunes does, and they're not going to drag me on international TV and drag me over the coals and ask what I'm talking about. So Nunes has to be very, very careful about what he says. He's probably been thinking these things for a long time, but he's now only able to talk about them or raise the questions because the recent document dumps sort of set the precedent so he can now talk about this. But he's probably been thinking this for a long time, just like I have. I've just been able to say it. Nunes has had to kind of hold his fire until he had more evidence that he could go down this road. I've been down this road now for months, and especially since the declassification of these footnotes. And I think that what Nunes is talking about is exactly what I'm talking about. And I think what I'm suggesting here is that one of the very biggest revelations that are going to come out of the Durham investigation, and we may even get this information before the Durham investigation starts indicting people. One of the biggest things that's going to be one of the biggest revelations, let's say, because I don't like the word bombshell. Too many people say bombshell. So let's just say one of the greatest revelations that's about to come out in the very near future, whether it's before or after Durham starts indicting people, is that we are going to finally get the truth about what I've been saying for a very long time, which is that there were no Russians. And what I mean by that is that this stuff wasn't generated. This disinformation wasn't generated from within Putin's government or Putin's intelligence agencies or anything that happened in Russia. And what I'm saying is that we're going to find out, and I think this is where Nunes is going, that these 2 guys, Trubnikov and Sornov, we're going to find out that these 2 individuals were actually working for the CIA. And likely it was Halper who contacted these individuals and gave them this information, and they were probably paid for it, probably compensated for it, and were probably directed, hey, why don't you contact Steele and give Steele this information? In other words, what I'm saying is that the disinformation didn't come from Russia to Trubnikov or Sornov. It came likely from Halper and the CIA. The CIA is taking these Russian cutouts who they have good relationships with, who are former Russian intel officers, who are now retired and are now internationalists, and they have a lot of friends in the West, including, obviously, CIA assets like Halper, who claims to be good friends with these guys, and claims to have even invited Trubnikov to London twice in 2016 to speak at the London Center. So what I'm suggesting is that the disinformation, I'm not suggesting there's not disinformation. I'm just saying it's not Russian disinformation. I'm saying it's CIA disinformation. And I think one of the biggest revelations that's going to come out in the next maybe week, 2 weeks, a month, or whenever Durham does his thing, is we're going to learn that these 2 or 3 sources for Steele's primary subsource, Milian, we're going to find out that these Russians, Trubnikov, Sernov, and the other one, whoever Nunes is talking about, that their information did not come from within Putin's intelligence services or his government. That this information that was given to Trubnikov and Sernov were given to them by Halper or some other Western intelligence asset, likely Halper, but could have been someone else. And then that information was passed to Steele. So the origin of the disinformation is not Russia. The origin of the disinformation that was fed to these so-called Russians came from the CIA, and will most likely, specifically, Halper. That, I think, is going to become the biggest revelation. Because right now, this narrative still kind of plays into the overall narrative of Russia meddled in the elections. And as long as you go down this road, it's still safe. You can say, well, the FBI, the CIA, were duped. Putin's intelligence people duped us. These Russians fed Steele this information coming from Putin and his intelligence. Like I say, I think we're going to find out that one of the major revelations coming down the pike, one of the biggies, is when they have to actually admit that the disinformation, if you want to call it that, the disinformation did not come from Putin's government or Russian intelligence. It came from U.S. intelligence and using their assets like Halper, maybe others, who fed the information to these former Russian intelligence people, and they fed it into Steele or Confusion GPS or directly to the FBI in some way or form. That is what I believe will become the greater revelation of all this, and it will back up what I've been saying for 2 years, that there really were no Russians, meaning Russians working for the Russian government, Putin, his intelligence agencies, or anything like that. This was all a totally home-cooked deal. Home-cooked deal. And all the information found its way into that loop, that feedback loop of Confusion GPS, the Clinton campaign, the FBI, Christopher Steele. Just a loop. And things were just being thrown into the loop and recycled and recirculated until it all found its way in some way, shape, or form into the FBI, into the dossier, to Confusion GPS, which found its way to Bruce Orr, which was then passed on to the DOJ through Bruce Orr. All these different channels and pipelines that they were using to feed this information in. We know about all that. And the only thing that really remains to be proven is what was the source. That's what Durham is getting to the bottom of. What was the source? Who was the source? Who started to spin up all this garbage? Where did it come from? And I think we're going to find, when we get to this point, at some point, we're going to find that the origin of this garbage that was thrown into the loop didn't come from Putin, Russia intelligence, or anything like that. It came from the CIA. That is the point that I'm making, have been making, and that is what Devin Nunes signaled this morning on Fox, is what he's starting to look at and think the same thing. That, he's like, we need to look at these 3 Russians. I'm not sure who the third one is he's talking about, but I know the other 2. And that's what he's talking about. He's starting to think the same thing I've been saying for a very long time, was this information likely didn't come from Putin or Russian intelligence. It likely came from within the inner loop. And I think that's where Nunes is going. For those of you who saw that interview, I think that's where Nunes is going with this. And he's headed down the right track, let me tell you. Now, as far as, I'm going to pick up just a moment before I move on to this stuff that's still going on over the past couple days because of John Solomon's statement that he said he believes there could be indictments coming down this week. Just a few, not many, just a few. I don't believe we're going to see any. I think the indictment's already there. I think there's sealed indictments. There'll be more to come, but I think there's already indictments. They're just sealed. I know there's an indictment against Kleinsmith, obviously. That's probably, So I think there are indictments that are just sealed, and I don't think Durham's ready to release them yet, or unseal them yet. And I don't think it'll happen this week. I know Solomon saying it could happen this week. I don't think so because of coronavirus. I don't think, for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't think that Barr right now in this precarious time with coronavirus, I don't think they want to come out with a major headline that they've just indicted Brennan or Clapper or Comey or one of these guys right in this precarious time with coronavirus. First of all, it will take people's mind off of and focus off of coronavirus and what we're trying to do to get through this period so we can all get back to work and get back to life somewhat as normal. And so Barr doesn't want to throw something like this into the mix and take people's mind off of what we're trying to deal with coronavirus. And the other part of that is he doesn't want coronavirus, which occupies 90% of the news headlines at this point, if not more. He wants to make sure that coronavirus is kind of a bit behind us and that we've moved on from that point, and so that when he does announce these indictments, they get top, headline news coverage. Right now, they can indict Brennan tomorrow, but it would probably would barely be covered by the media because they've got coronavirus to talk about in its place, and they don't want to talk about that anyway. So I think Barr and Durham don't want to compete with coronavirus for news headlines. They probably and they don't want to distract away from the country, away from what we should be doing right now to get through the coronavirus thing. So I don't believe that there'll be indictments will be unsealed this week, but I do believe that shortly after we get past coronavirus and most of the country is back to work and getting back to normal, I think then we can start to see some of these indictments being unsealed. But I don't see it happening in the next week or two because of coronavirus. So that's my thoughts on that. Another thing that I think that a lot of people are going to be focusing on at some point, we're not there yet, but eventually we're going to get there, and that's we have to go back and take a look at this report that the bug-eyed fool Adam Schiff put out, which was put together primarily by the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee, where they did their own little report and investigation, and they came out and, of course, totally cleared the FBI, the DOJ, and totally gave credit to the dossier as being, a solid piece of research and all this. So the bug-eyed fool, keep in mind, the bug-eyed fool, all the information that we're seeing now, from the FISA warrants, the Papadopoulos transcripts, and other things, Adam Schiff, when he and the Democrats on that committee wrote their report, they knew about all of this. They knew about all of it, which means that Adam the bug-eyed fool Schiff grossly misled the country in his report about the legitimacy of the dossier, of the spy warrants, and of the investigation in general. In other words, an attempted cover-up. And this is essentially, his entire report is a lie. And there may be some legal consequences, could be charges filed. I don't think this will happen, but certainly the credibility of Schiff and his report has been destroyed. But, we shouldn't forget that it happened. That Schiff, having all the information we're getting now, knew all this a long time ago when he wrote his report and released it, which gave total thumbs up to the dossier, to the Mueller investigation, to the Mueller report, Schiff's report says there was no problem with the FISAs, there was no problem with the dossier, there was no problem with the confidential informants on Papadopoulos. They gave a thumbs up to everything the FBI, DOJ, and intelligence community did in that report by Schiff and the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee, and we now know that they had the information at the time that proved all of Schiff's report to be wrong, incorrect. And I think that there could be some consequences for that. We'll find out. Also, since we've had these document dumps, a few things have trickled out. We have two other things that have trickled out. One is that the FBI left out one of Steele's memos from the dossier. And this is the first I've heard of that. But of course, we know that Steele was writing the dossier in memo form. Each memo would be given to the FBI and to Fusion GPS. And at some point, when he finished his last memo, then they put all of them together, and that created the overall dossier. Now, we're learning now that information from one of those memos was taken out of the dossier that the FBI was holding when they went to the FISA court. One of the memos, the information from one of the memos was left completely out of what they showed the FISA court. And we're now finding out why. It's because in that memo, Steele acknowledges to the FBI that he was the source, or that he did speak to Isikoff before he wrote that article for Yahoo News, the one that the FBI used to get the FISA warrant. One of the things they used to get the FISA warrant, which was nothing more than just a report backing up Steele's accusations. And of course, they never told the FISA court that, of course, Steele was the source. And now we find out that there was one of the memos that Steele wrote that was part of the dossier. In his explanation, in his briefing to the FBI at that time, admitted and acknowledged that he had spoken with Isikoff and likely was his source. And so they couldn't give that to the FISA court, so they left that out. They left that memo out because it would have revealed that Steele was the source of both the dossier and the Isikoff Yahoo News article. More funny business. And another big question that I keep asking that I think is going to be another, we haven't gotten there yet. We're starting to hear some members of Congress, Nunes, Jordan, I've heard a few other people bring it up. And this is ultimately going to be the next place that we're going to get to once we get beyond this first part of Durham's investigation. I believe at some point we are going to arrive at another big question, which is sort of that what did you know, when did you know it? And that's going to be with Uncle Bob, the executioner, Mueller. And particularly when you look at the Mueller report, we know that from these documents that we've seen come out that Mueller had all of this information about this so-called Russian disinformation. But yet he really doesn't do any investigation of that in the Mueller investigation. And once he learned that, that should have been the total focus of his investigation, because that was the thing that the Mueller investigation should have been looking at. Because the other stuff, Trump Russia, they'd already determined was crazy, wasn't true. And the only real thing to investigate would have been whether or not there was Russian disinformation feeding the Steele dossier. And it's impossible that Mueller and his team could have overlooked that. Impossible that they couldn't have known about it. Impossible that they could have, had this information about the Russian disinformation and just thought, oh, well, that's not important. It's just not going to fly. So at some point, that question is going to come up about the Mueller team led by Andrew Wiseass. And how was it possible that you guys had access and you knew about this Russian disinformation, yet you don't address it at all in the Mueller report? You don't investigate it, you don't address it, you don't do any of that. You just pretend like it doesn't even exist, just like the FBI did. You did the same thing that the FBI did. You completely ignored this information given to you by the FBI's own analyst. And Uncle Bob the Executioner is going to have to explain why he did that. And there is no explanation for why he did that, other than he was running a corrupt investigation. Which is why I think that Uncle Bob the Executioner and the Hillary donor posse may also be looking at some legal issues coming up. Now, let's go ahead and get to Dumbass of the Week. Let's start off right here. We have Oregon Outback. He went with Dementia Joe's Handlers. Cards went with Madame Botox. Scott Johnson, Madame Botox. Andreas Manuela went with Cuomo and his little brother Frito, along with Barrio. Peter James, our good friend in the Great Northwest, is going to go with Madame Botox, Pelosi Galore, along with Commie Bernie, and Brisma Joe's Handlers. Larry is going to go with his family. Sad to hear, my good friend. I know exactly where you're coming from. A lot of people in your situation, and he's talking about the fact of the hydrochloroquine and how it's being used by a lot of people, but certain people want to completely reject it because Trump suggested it. And that's Trump derangement syndrome. And apparently Larry's got members of his family who have Trump derangement syndrome. I do as well. Not many, but a couple. And I have a few friends that got Trump derangement syndrome. I'm sorry to hear that, Larry, but as you're probably finding out, as I found out, when you have Trump derangement syndrome, I'm not sure what the cure is for it. You can't really reason with these people. They've already, in their mind, have locked in to Orange Man bad, and there's nothing that you're going to say or do or evidence you're going to produce that's going to change their mind otherwise. Right now, there is no cure, as far as I know, for Trump derangement syndrome. Hopefully someday we'll find a cure for that, and things will improve, but sorry to hear you're having those issues, Larry, but join the crowd. There's many of us in the same boat. Mystic Meadows is going to go with Frito, Chris Cuomo, Perk Dogs is going to go with Dr. Fauci, Madam Botox, and Gates. That's right, Gates. Doing a little bit of profit motive for her, it appears. And let's see, we have Jean Alley, our good friend. Jean is going to go with Judge Amy Jackson Berman. She is Vermin, Judge Vermin, along with Madam Botox and Dr. Fauci. Kat Heron is going to go with COVID-19. Yes, COVID-19. That could be certainly the dumbass of the week. Keith Fellows is going to go with Madam Botox, Bill de Blasio, and both of the Cumos. One Day Closer to Death will go with the Cuomo brothers. Susan Lowell is going to go with Madam Botox and her chocolate. Madam Botox and her chocolate and her $2,400 freezers. It appears she has two of them. Let's see, we have Gordon. Gordon is going to go with Dr. Fauci, Dr. Gates, and the Biden family. There's three solid picks. Well done, Gordon. Freddie Schaffer is going to go with Governor Northam. Gene can simply empathize with that pick. Gretchen Whitmer, I knew she would pop up soon. And the FBI footnotes. Birdwell is going to go with Pelosi, Bill Maher, and Dr. Fauci. Stage Door Johnny is going to go with the lefty governors. Yes, the lefty governors, but I think they're losing that fight. If you look around, these lefty governors are softening up already. Fredo and Madam Botox. Babs is going to go with Dr. Fauci, and all of those who don't push back against the tyranny. Fitzroy FC is going to go with Pelosi galore. Lisa Meyer will go with Pelosi galore, along with the Lib governors and Dr. Fauci. Sherman Lynn is going to go with Madam Botox and the media. Jamie Anzavino is going to go with Piglosi, and Piglosi. Gregory Woolery is going to go with Gretchen Whitmer. She looks like a one-term governor to me. Net will go with Madam Botox. Ricky Ricardo will go with Dr. Fauci. The clueless voters who are allowing this thing to continue. It's time to shut it down. It's time to pull the plug on this entire program. It's a fail. And along with the Michigan governor, that would be Whitmer. Douglas is going to go with Giselle Maxwell. Apparently she's trying to sue someone who's dead. I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm not up on that story, but I'll take Douglas's word for it. And, of course, the governor of New Jersey and Fox News. Well done, Douglas. T.W. Wintex is going to go with Madam Botox. Joey D. is going to go with Madam Botox. The Michigan Governor Whitmer, along with fake news. Jonathan Cassidy is going to go with Madam Botox, Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Gates. Sue Sung. It's always backwards. Sue Sung will go with Governor Whitmer, Pelosi galore, and Gates. It's Angry Bob. Angry Bob is going to go with Governor Whitmer, Madam Botox, and the American people for going along with the hoax. Yeah, I don't think we had much choice at first, but now you can see a lot of people are not going along with it. And so Angry Bob, I appreciate where you're coming from there, but you may not have to be too angry too much longer, because the folks are getting quite angry, and they are getting ready to call bullshit on this whole thing. I give it another week, maybe two, and probably the entire damn country, including California, is going to say, okay, we've had enough. The only state that might need to stay under a bit more control is New York, just because their problem is so bad. They have so many people that ride mass transit. How are you going to get back to normal of moving all those people in such close proximity to one another without restarting the infections? And I know there's other theories to that. I'm not really sure how that's all going to go on, but that's New York's problem, New York City's problem right now. That doesn't mean the whole state of New York. It just means New York City. There are, believe it or not, there are places in New York that are not part of New York City. So I think there's a few small pockets where they may have to continue to quarantine people down, but the majority of the country is ready to get back to work. Let's see. I know here in Ohio, May 1st is the target date for us to get back to normal. Although this weekend, I noticed a lot more people getting out this weekend. Noticed a lot more people getting back to normal. I noticed a few businesses that were open that had been closed. So it looks like people are kind of on their own, beginning to just defy the governor's order. They're sort of slowly kind of going back to it on their own now anyway. So the governors are losing control. The people are now just asserting themselves and saying, look, we've done this for, a month and a half or whatever. It's time. It's time. So I think that the governors are going to be pushed by the will of the people at the end of the game. So that seems to be what's going on. Michael is going to go with Madam Botox. Jeanette Bateman is going to go with Dr. Fauci, Gates, and Pelosi. JV will go for the people for tolerating the scandemic. Yes, as I just said, the people for tolerating the scandemic, not for very much longer. The media and the Democratic governors, and they too are going to be pushed into action. Michael Stella will go with Madam Botox. Mike G will go with Madam Botox. Scott Johnson will go with the New Jersey and North Carolina governors. And Impeach My Ass is going to go with Pelosi galore. So there you go. Well, let's go ahead and see who won this week. Well, it looks like we have an overwhelming win. Not even close. No one's even close to second place. It's going to be, again, Pelosi galore, sitting out there in San Francisco in her multi-million-dollar mansion, eating her expensive ice cream, completely clueless, absolutely clueless about what's going on in the country. She should be in Washington. As we speak right now, you have thousands and thousands of small businesses who need to access that money. That money is run out, and all they need for Madam Botox to do is to get her ass back in Washington and sign on to an extension of that bill so they can reapply funds to the already existing account. It's not, they don't have to even come up with anything new. It's just to get Congress to authorize more funds for this program to help small businesses meet their payroll so that they don't have to lay people off or shut the doors. And Madam Botox sits out there in San Francisco completely oblivious to how stupid she looks in this whole deal. This is a big political fail, but I think she's almost as senile as Biden at this point, and so out of touch with normal people that she just doesn't even know the damage that she's doing, nor does she care. And that's what you ultimately get to, is the woman simply doesn't care. And I think this is going to blow back badly on her. If I'm the Republicans, I show up in Congress tomorrow, both in the House and the Senate, and I begin giving floor speeches. 2-minute floor speeches. Every member come up and give a 2-minute speech and show the bill. Say it's right here. We just need Pelosi to come back and sign on to it with the Democrats. We can apply funding to this small business loan program. And where are they? Where are they? And I would have mock votes. I literally would sit there and have a mock vote, 3 of them a day. And I would stand there day after day until finally Pelosi is forced to come back and resupply this program with money. So Madam Botox is the undisputed heavyweight champion, not even close, of Dumbass of the Week for this week's TowerGate. Dr. Fauci will come in second place this week for Dumbass of the Week, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer will come in third place. Pelosi, Fauci, and Whitmer are Dumbasses of the Week. Well deserved. Well deserved. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys stay safe and stay well. See you. Bye.